At 2:17 on a Thursday afternoon, inside Whitmore Performance Gallery, Claire Whitmore pointed one red-polished finger at her yellow Lamborghini and said it would be mine if I proved her white Porsche did not need the $356,989 repair Victor Harlan was holding in his hand. But if I failed, I would sign a statement admitting my little garage was not qualified to touch German engineering. My 7-year-old daughter Lucy sat beside a chrome tool cart, squeezing her blue hearing aid case so hard her knuckles went pale, reading Victor's lips as he called me a backstreet mechanic. I looked down into the open relay box, saw a red 10-amp fuse sitting where it had no business sitting, and for 1 second I forgot how to breathe. Because that little $6 piece of plastic and metal did not look broken. It looked placed. And if I was right about that, then the Porsche was not the thing in that room being tested. I was. My daughter was. The truth was. Before I tell you what happened when I touched that fuse, do me one favor. If you have ever stood in a room where people with cleaner hands decided you were worth less than them before you ever open your mouth, hit that subscribe button. This story is for the people who learn to stay quiet, work clean, and let the truth make the noise. My name is Ethan Hayes. I am 39 years old, and I make my living finding the problems expensive people pay expensive shops not to find. I do not own a marble showroom. I do not wear a suit that fits like it was cut around my pride. I own a 2-bay garage on the edge of Milford with a roof that ticks when it rains, a coffee maker that burns everything afternoon, and a little girl who knows the sound of a Porsche fuel pump better than most men wearing dealership badges. Lucy had not been supposed to be there that day. That is the part that still sits wrong in my chest. She was supposed to be with Mrs. Alvarez from the apartment downstairs, eating peanut butter crackers and pretending not to watch cartoons too loud. But Mrs. Alvarez had a fall that morning. The school nurse had called about Lucy's hearing aid battery dying again, and by the time Whitmore's assistant called my shop, I had one choice: say no to the strangest job I had ever been offered, or bring my daughter with me into a world built to remind people like us where the side door was. So she came. She wore her denim jacket with the little yellow car sticker on the pocket, the same one she had stuck on her hearing aid case, because she said fast cars looked like they were trying to outrun sad thoughts. She sat quietly. Too quietly. And when Victor lifted that repair estimate like a judge reading a sentence, when the technicians behind him laughed into their sleeves, when Claire looked at the oil on my hands, and not once at my face, I felt Lucy watching me more than I felt the room watching me. I wanted to tell her not to listen, but that was the cruel joke. My girl had spent half her life fighting to hear the world clearly, and that afternoon the world made sure every ugly word was easy to read. I did not raise my voice. I did not defend myself. I only reached for the relay box and saw the red fuse again, its corners shaved smooth, its metal leg darkened in the wrong direction, its cheap plastic glowing under the white showroom lights like a warning nobody rich enough had bothered to see. Then Victor stepped closer and said, "Careful, Mr. Hayes. One wrong move, and your daughter gets to watch her career end in real time." That was when I knew I had seen something he wished I had not. To understand why I did not flinch when Victor Harlan tried to end my career in front of my daughter, you have to understand what kind of morning brings a man to a place like Whitmore Performance Gallery with oil under his nails and a little blue hearing aid case in his pocket. That morning started at 5:38, with rain tapping the metal sign over Hayes Motor Works and Lucy standing on a milk crate beside the office sink, brushing her teeth with one hand and holding a dead hearing aid battery in the other like it had personally betrayed her. "It's okay, Dad," she said, because children who have watched bills pile up learn to comfort adults far too early. I told her it was not okay. Then I smiled anyway, because that is one of the small dishonesties a father is allowed when the truth would only make a child feel heavy. My garage sat behind an old tire shop on Harbor Road. 2 bays, 1 lift, 1 cracked concrete floor, and a workbench scarred by 20 years of men setting down things harder than they meant to. The place smelled like rubber, cold coffee, brake cleaner, and the faint sweetness of the strawberry shampoo Lucy used because she said it made the office feel less like old engines thinking sad thoughts. Her drawings were taped above my parts cabinet. Not because I was sentimental, though I was, but because every time I was tempted to take a shortcut, every time some customer wanted a cheap lie or some desperate month made a bad decision look practical, I could look up and remember who was learning from me. I had a reputation in a narrow little corner of Connecticut for finding the problem after everyone else had sold the wrong answer. Not because I was magic. Magic is what people call patience when they do not want to admit they stopped looking too soon. I used heat guns, wiring diagrams, voltage drop tests, old factory manuals with grease on the corners, and the kind of listening you only learn after enough nights alone with an engine that refuses to tell the truth until it is warm. Lucy called it car whispering. I called it paying attention. By 7, she was sitting at my desk with a bowl of cereal gone soft, trying to hide the way she kept turning her left ear toward me. The new hearing aid processor was still 3 months of payments away, if nothing else broke, which meant, of course, everything had started breaking. The compressor coughed. The landlord had left another envelope taped to the side door. My truck needed tires I was pretending not to see. And still, when Mr. Daly from the marina came in wanting me to charge him for a new alternator he did not need, so he could bill his company, I slid his keys back across the counter. I fix cars, I told him. I don't fix invoices. He stared at me like honesty was a luxury item. Maybe it is. After he left, Lucy looked up from her spelling worksheet and said, "Was that why Mom said you make life harder?" I wiped my hands on a towel that had given up being clean years ago and said, "No, Lou, that's why I can sleep." She thought about that for a long second, then pushed the better half of her toast toward me without a word. That is the kind of rich I understood. A little after 9, Mrs. Alvarez from downstairs called to say she had fallen outside the pharmacy and could not take Lucy after school. At 9:47, the school nurse called about the dying battery. And at 10:16, while I was tracing a misfire on an old Boxster and Lucy was coloring a yellow car sticker onto the lid of her blue case, the shop phone rang with a number I did not recognize. The woman on the other end said she was calling from Whitmore Performance Gallery, and that Claire Whitmore had a Porsche no one else could fix before 5 o'clock. The woman on the phone had the kind of voice people use when they have never had to wonder whether a bill could wait until Friday. Polite, clean, already halfway impatient. She told me Claire Whitmore needed an independent diagnostic opinion on a 2018 Porsche 911 Turbo S before 5 o'clock, that 3 certified teams had failed to agree on the fault, and that Mr. Victor Harlan had prepared a full repair recommendation totaling $356,989. She said that number as if she were reading the weather. I looked across the shop at Lucy, who was pressing a fresh sticker onto her blue hearing aid case with the careful concentration of surgeon, and I almost said no. Men like me learn to hear traps inside opportunities. A rich woman with a broken Porsche does not call a two-bay shop because everything is going well. She calls because someone needs a witness, a scapegoat, or a fool. But then the assistant said the Porsche had been cutting fuel under heat, dropping voltage across the relay circuit, throwing ignition errors that vanished when the car cooled, and slipping in a limp mode without leaving one clean trail behind it. I stopped wiping my hands. Those symptoms bothered me, not because they were complicated, but because they were too neatly complicated, like somebody had taken 3 different problems and tied them together with fishing line. Who worked on it last? I asked. There was a pause. A small one. Whitmore Performance Gallery has maintained the vehicle under Mr. Harlan's supervision for years, she said. It belonged to Ms. Whitmore's father. That changed the air around the phone. Cars are never just cars when they outlive the people who love them first. I told her I could be there by noon if I brought my daughter. Another pause. Longer this time. Then she said, Ms. Whitmore is not fond of disruptions. I looked at Lucy, at the processor battery still sitting dead on the counter, at the landlord's envelope by the door, at the Boxster waiting half apart in Bay 2, and I said, neither am I. But she comes with me, or I don't come. The gallery sat 40 minutes south, behind black iron gates that opened slower than hospital doors. My truck rattled over a driveway made of stone, so smooth it felt embarrassed to be touched by my tires. Lucy sat beside me, quiet, holding her blue case in both hands. When the building came into view, all glass and white steel and reflected sky, she whispered, "Do we go in the front?" I wanted to tell her yes like it was simple. Instead, I said, "We go where they told us, and we stand like we belong wherever the truth is needed." Inside, the air smelled like polished leather, citrus wax, and money trying very hard not to have a smell. The Porsche sat in the center bay under surgical lights, White paint shining cold, rear deck open, battery tender still clipped on. 20 feet away, a yellow Lamborghini crouched behind a velvet rope like an animal that knew everyone was looking at it. Claire Whitmore stood near it in a red blazer, blonde hair pulled back clean from a face that had learned not to give much away. She was younger than I expected, sharper too, with eyes that moved from my boots to my work shirt to Lucy and stopped just long enough for me to feel the judgment land. Victor Harlan stood beside her in a blue suit, silver hair perfect, repair estimate folded under one arm. He smiled at me before Claire did. That was how I knew he was the dangerous one. "Mr. Hayes," Claire said, cool as a key turning in a lock. "My assistant says you believe you can find what my certified specialist missed." I set my tool bag down gently, because Lucy was watching how I carried myself. "I believe the car will tell us if we let it." One of the technicians behind Victor coughed into a laugh. Claire's mouth did not move, but something in her eyes tightened. Then Victor unfolded the estimate, held it up where everyone could see the number, and said, "Then let's not waste Ms. Whitmore's afternoon. The little garage man can have 10 minutes before real work resumes." Every face in that glass room turned toward me like I'd been brought in for entertainment, and Lucy reached for my sleeve just as the Porsche's relay clicked once, too late, from somewhere under the rear panel. That single late click from the Porsche should have mattered to everyone in the room, but rich rooms have a way of deciding what matters before the truth gets a vote. Victor heard it. I know he heard it, because the smile on his face tightened at the corners, just barely, the way a bolt tightens right before the thread strips. But instead of looking toward the rear relay panel, he lifted the estimate higher and let the number do the talking for him. $356,989, he said, slow enough for every technician and sales manager in the gallery to enjoy it. "That is what real diagnostics look like, Mr. Hayes. Not guesswork from a man whose truck is leaking oil on MS." Whitmore's stone driveway. A few people laughed. Not loud. That would have been less cruel. This was the polished kind of laughter, the kind people use when they want to make sure you understand you're not being welcomed, only tolerated. I felt Lucy's fingers pinch the back of my sleeve. She had read every word. Her blue hearing aid case was pressed flat against her chest now, that little yellow car sticker bent under her thumb. Claire stood beside the Lamborghini with her arms folded, watching me like she was waiting to see whether I would make myself small or angry. I didn't either. A man can survive being looked down on if he does not help them lower him. "The truck leaves marks," I said quietly. "Bad wiring leaves patterns." I came for the second one. That killed one laugh, but not Victor's. He stepped closer, smelling faintly of cedar cologne and expensive breath mints, and glanced down at Lucy as if she were another item I had dragged in without permission. "And does your assistant have certification too?" he asked. The room went still in that ugly way a room does when everyone knows a line has been crossed, but nobody powerful has decided whether it counts. Lucy's hand slipped from my sleeve. For a second, I thought she might cry. Instead, she opened her blue case, checked the dead battery inside, and closed it with both hands like she was putting something fragile away from dirty air. That hurt worse than the laughter. I looked at Victor then, really looked at him, at the perfect suit, the silver hair, the estimate held like scripture, and the tiny tremor in his thumb, where it touched the page marked electrical system replacement. "She's my daughter," I said, "and she hears enough." Claire's eyes moved from Lucy to me, and for the first time that afternoon, something small shifted behind them. Not apology, not trust, just the faint discomfort of a woman realizing the joke in the room had found child. Victor saw it too, and he moved fast to get the floor back under his feet. 10 minutes, he said sharply. No removing components, no altering settings, no touching the control modules. If your miracle diagnosis is real, it should not need theater. You wanted me boxed in. No tools that mattered. No time that mattered. No chance to touch the place that late relay click had come from. Around us, the technicians folded their arms like judges, and a Lamborghini's yellow paint threw bright, useless light across the white Porsche's open deck. I could smell hot plastic from somewhere near the rear panel, faint as a match blown out in another room. Lucy smelled it too. I knew because she looked at the Porsche, then at me, and whispered, "Dad, why does the pretty car smell scared?" The laughter stopped then, not because they understood, because a child had said out loud what every adult in that room had missed. I knelt beside the relay box without asking Victor's permission, and there it was again. The red fuse, too new on one side, too worn on the other, sitting under the clear cover like a lie that had started to sweat. I did not touch the red fuse right away. That was the first thing Victor got wrong about me. Men like him think a mechanic's hands move before his mind does, like we're all instinct and grease and not much else. But the truth is, the best work I have ever done has started with not touching anything. I crouched beside the open relay box, close enough to smell the hot plastic Lucy had noticed, and I let the room get impatient around me. The Porsche ticked softly as it cooled under the showroom lights. Somewhere behind me, a technician shifted his weight. Victor sighed like my silence was costing him money. Claire said nothing, but I could feel her watching now in a different way. Not kinder exactly, not yet, but narrower, sharper, as if she had started measuring the distance between what Victor was saying and what the car was telling us. The red fuse sat in slot F12 under a clear cover, smudged by one fingerprint that did not match the dust around it. That was the first wrong thing. The second was the color. A 10-amp red blade fuse can be perfectly ordinary in the right circuit, but in that position on that car, with that fuel pump relay layout, it was like finding a cheap brass button sewn onto a funeral suit. It worked just enough to fool somebody in a hurry. It failed just enough to make everything else look guilty. I took my flashlight, angled it low, and saw the corner Lucy had spotted before I wanted to admit she had. The plastic edge was shaved smooth, not cracked, not melted, shaved. The metal leg had heat discoloration on the exit side, but not the feed side, which meant the fuse had not simply aged there. It had been stressed in a way that did not belong to normal failure. "That is a $6 part," Victor said behind me, forcing a laugh. "If you're about to tell Ms. Whitmore that a $6 fuse explains a six-figure system failure, I hope you understand why nobody in this building is going to take that seriously." I looked up at him. "I don't need you to take me seriously." Then I looked at Claire. "I need the car to be tested honestly." Her jaw tightened at that word. Honestly. Some words land harder in rich rooms than accusations. Lucy slid down from the stool without making a sound and came to stand near my shoulder, still holding her blue case. I want to tell her to step back, because children should not have to stand close to grown men lying in expensive shoes. But she leaned toward the relay box and whispered, "Dad, that red thing is too shiny on one side." The room went quiet again, and this time it was not because a child had said something cute. It was because she was right. I took the fuse puller from my kit, held it up so everyone could see I was not hiding anything, and eased the red blade out of the slot. Victor moved half a step forward. "Too fast. You were told not to remove components." "You told me not to alter settings," I said. "This is inspection." The fuse came free with a tiny click. I laid it on a clean white service cloth beside Lucy's blue hearing aid case, and the whole ugly difference between our worlds sat there in two small objects. One cheap heart that could make a rich woman believe her father's Porsche was dying, and one battered little case my daughter carried, because hearing the truth had never been easy for her. Claire stepped closer then. Not to me, to the fuse. "What are you seeing?" she asked, and for the first time there was no performance in her voice. I almost answered too quickly. Then I noticed the faint marks stamped into the plastic near the blade, half scraped off but still visible under the light. WHP. Whitmore Performance. Internal stock marking. This fuse had not come from my pocket, not from some roadside parts bin, not from chance. It had come from inside Claire's own building. I covered that realization with my thumb before Victor could see my face change. "I need the original service logbook," I said, "and the camera footage from this bay last night." Victor's smile disappeared so completely it was like someone had switched off a sign. Victor's smile disappearing did more to convince Claire than anything I had said so far. People like Victor Harlan do not lose control loudly. They lose it in little places first, in the muscles around the mouth, in the quick glance toward an assistant, in the hand that suddenly grips a folder too hard. Claire saw it. I saw her see it. She did not turn on him. Not yet. A woman like Claire Whitmore had survived too long in rooms full of powerful men to move before she understood the shape of the knife. Get the logbook, she said. Victor's head turned toward her. Claire, this is unnecessary. I said, get it. That was the first time I heard anything in her voice that did not sound polished for public use. One of the assistants hurried away, heels clicking across the marble, and the room held itself in a tight, expensive silence. I kept the red fuse on the white cloth beside Lucy's blue hearing aid case and did not let my thumb leave the half-scraped WHP mark. Lucy stood close enough that her shoulder brushed mine. She did not ask questions. She just watched Claire the way children watch grown-ups when they're trying to decide whether the grown-up is dangerous or only afraid. The logbook came in a black leather binder with Whitmore stamped on the cover in silver. Claire took it with both hands, and for the first time since I had walked into that gallery, the Porsche stopped looking like an asset and started looking like something she had inherited with grief still inside it. She opened to the electrical service section, and I saw her throat move when she found her father's handwriting in the margin. Small, square letters. Fuel relay updated after Watkins Glen weekend. Correct fuse rating verified. Do not substitute. I did not touch the page. I only pointed near it. That note matters. Victor gave a short laugh. Her father wrote notes on everything. It hardly proves. Let him finish, Claire said, and the room shifted again. Not enough to save me. Enough to make Victor hate me more. I asked for the service camera from the night before. Victor objected before the assistant could move. Policy, he said. Privacy, he said. Liability, he said. Men who are hiding something always have very professional words for locked doors. Claire looked at him for a long second, then nodded to the assistant. The screen on the wall came alive with grainy footage of the Porsche sitting alone under low security lights. 10:46 p.m. Empty bay. 10:51. Still empty. Then the feed jumped to 11:02, and suddenly Victor was standing too close to the screen. Where are the missing 11 minutes? I asked. Nobody answered. The only sound was Lucy's case clicking open in her hands, then closing again. Open, close, open, close. A small, nervous sound in a room pretending not to be scared. Victor turned on me then, not with anger, but with something colder. Mr. Hayes, you are very close to making accusations that could ruin you. I looked at the Porsche. I looked at the logbook. I looked at my daughter's hands. I'm not accusing anyone, I said. I'm asking why a $6 part is making a room full of experts afraid of tests. Claire's eyes moved to the key fob on the counter, and she picked it up and held it out to me. Start it, she said. Victor went pale. Claire held the key fob out to me, like she was handing over more than a way to start a car. Victor saw that too, and for one thin second the whole room seemed to balance on the space between her fingers and mine. I took it carefully, not because it was expensive, because Lucy was watching, and I wanted her to see a man accept responsibility without grabbing at power. Before I started, I said, I need one proper replacement fuse from your parts drawer, same circuit rating listed in the logbook, and I want Ms. Whitmore to see the package before I install it. Victor stepped in fast. Absolutely not. This is absurd. You cannot reduce a complex drivability failure to a convenience store fuse. I looked at him, then at the estimate still lying on the counter like a rich man's version of a threat. No, I said, you did that when you turned it into $356,000. Nobody laughed. One of the junior technicians, a young guy with nervous eyes and a Whitmore badge clipped crooked to his shirt, opened the locked parts cabinet after Claire nodded. He brought over a sealed pack of fuses and set it on the white cloth beside the old red blade and Lucy's blue case. $6.12, printed right on the label. Such a small number. Small enough to be ignored. Small enough to be hidden under a mountain of labor, modules, wiring, and fear. I held both fuses under the service light, so Claire could see the difference herself. The scrape marking on the bad one, the heat stain running the wrong way, the tiny rough place where someone had shaved the plastic so it would sit flush under the clear cover. I still did not say sabotage. Not yet. A word like that, in a room like that, had to arrive with both feet on the ground. I installed the correct fuse, seated the cover, clipped my meter to the test point, and asked Claire to stand where she could see the voltage. Then I turned the key. The Porsche woke on the first crank. Not dramatic, not roaring like a movie, just clean, even, certain. The idle settled into a steady purr, the kind of sound a good flat six makes when every cylinder finally stops arguing with the one beside it. I watched the meter. No drop. I watched fuel pressure. Steady. I waited for the heat to come up, for the old failure to return, for the computer to panic and throw the car into limp mode the way Victor's paperwork said it always would. Nothing happened. The Porsche simply ran. And that, somehow, was louder than thunder. The technicians stopped shifting their feet. The assistant lowered her tablet. Claire stared at the engine bay, then at the estimate, then at me, and the look in her eyes changed in a way I had no defense against. It was not warmth. It was worse for her than warmth. It was doubt. Doubt in Victor. Doubt in the men she had trusted. Doubt in the version of me she had been comfortable dismissing. Lucy stepped closer and slipped her small hand into mine. She did not smile exactly, but her shoulders dropped for the first time since we had entered that glass room. "It sounds better," she whispered. I squeezed her fingers once. "It sounds honest," I said. Victor recovered before anyone else did. Men like him are built for the moment after truth embarrasses them. He clapped his hands once, sharp and ugly. "A temporary stabilization," he announced. "Nothing more. He has contaminated the diagnostic process, handled evidence, performed unauthorized work, and created liability for this company." Then he leaned near my ear, still smiling for the room, and spoke so softly only I could hear him. "Milford Elementary lets out at 3:10, doesn't it, Mr. Hayes?" The Porsche kept running perfectly behind me, but my blood went cold. For one heartbeat after Victor whispered my daughter's school dismissal time, I wanted to do something I would have regretted for the rest of my life. Not because I'm a violent man. I am not. But every father has a locked door inside him, and Victor Harlan had just put his hand on the knob. Lucy's fingers were still wrapped around mine, small and warm and trusting, and the Porsche was idling behind us as smooth as a promise. The room saw the car fixed. Only I had heard the price Victor wanted me to pay for proving it. He straightened his jacket and smiled for everyone else. "Ms. Whitmore," he said, "I strongly advise we end this demonstration before Mr. Hayes exposes your company to further liability." Then, without looking at me, he slid a business card across the counter and tapped it twice. On the back, written in neat blue ink, was a number large enough to buy Lucy's new processor, cover 6 months of rent, fix the compressor, replace my truck tires, and let me breathe for the first time in years. Beneath it were 3 words: "Walk away now." That was the trap. Not the Lamborghini. Not the repair estimate. That little card was the real test, because it offered me the one thing poverty makes holy: relief. I could take it, sell the story as a lucky fix, let Claire believe her Porsche had only embarrassed Victor instead of exposing him, and get my daughter what she needed. Nobody in that room knew how badly I wanted to say yes. Nobody except Lucy. She looked at the card, then at me, and opened her blue hearing aid case with trembling hands. Inside was the dead battery from that morning, the one we had been saving until we could replace it properly. She placed it beside Victor's card and the red fuse, 3 tiny objects in a row, and whispered, "Dad, I don't want to hear better, because somebody lied." The room went so quiet I could hear the Porsche cooling fan cycle on. Claire's face changed then. Not soft. Stronger than soft. She looked at Victor as if she was finally seeing the shape of the man who had been standing beside her for years. "What did you say to him?" she asked. Victor laughed once, too dry. "Claire, please. This is becoming emotional. What did you write on that card?" she said. I could have handed it to her like a weapon. I could have watched Victor's face break open in front of all the people who had laughed at me. A meaner man would have enjoyed that. A poorer, more frightened man might have taken the money and called it protection. I was both poorer and frightened. That is the part one will never lie about. But my daughter was watching how her father handled fear. So I picked up the card, placed it face up beside the estimate, and said, "This is not for sale." Victor's eyes hardened. "You have no evidence beyond a removed fuse and a missing video file." "Not quite," I said. I turned toward the yellow Lamborghini behind Claire, the same car she had used as a prize and a joke, and pointed to the tiny black lens tucked behind its windshield. Your valet camera was facing the Porsche bay last night. Claire did not move for 3 full seconds. Then she took one step toward the Lamborghini and unlocked it herself. Victor said her name, but this time she did not answer. The screen came alive on the dash, grainy and blue-tinted, and there he was at 10:56 p.m., silver hair, blue suit, leaning into the Porsche's relay box with his own key card clipped to his belt. Claire watched without blinking. Lucy pressed her blue case against my palm like she was reminding me to stay myself. I did not smile. I did not gloat. I only looked at Claire and said, "Your car was never dying. Someone wanted you scared enough to sign." And as Victor reached for his phone, I realized I had no idea whether telling the truth had just saved us or cost us everything. Victor got his phone halfway out before Claire spoke his name. Not loudly. That was what stopped him. A shout would have given him something to fight. Her voice was quiet enough that everyone in that glass room had to lean toward it. "Put it down." He looked at her as if she had misunderstood the order of the world. For years, Victor Harlan had stood close to her father's cars, her company, her grief, and her trust, and somewhere along the way he had mistaken closeness for ownership. But Claire did not look confused anymore. She looked hurt, and under that hurt something stronger was standing up. She had the assistant copy the Lamborghini's valet, recording to the company's server, then to legal, while the Porsche idled clean and steady behind us. No hidden witness appeared. No miracle arrived. Just the same small truths lined up where money could not step around them. The wrong red fuse, the missing 11 minutes, her father's logbook, Victor's card, and the video of his own hands inside the relay box. That was enough. Security did not drag him out. Claire would not allow a show. She simply took the badge from his jacket and said, "You are suspended pending investigation. Every estimate you signed will be audited." Victor looked at me then, not sorry, only furious that a man with oil under his nails had made him visible. I said nothing. Some men do not need to be punished by you once the truth has found their address. Then Claire picked up the Lamborghini keys and held them out. "I made a bet," she said. "I pay what I owe." Lucy's hand tightened around mine. I looked at that yellow car, at the thing Claire had used to make me small, and for one tired second, I understood why people let money become a language. It speaks fast. It speaks loudly. But my daughter stood beside me with a dead battery in her little blue case, and I knew exactly what lesson would ride home with us if I took a trophy, just because I could. "I'll take my invoice paid," I said. "I'll take a written correction that Hayes Motor Works did not misdiagnose your car. And if you want to do something real, audit Victor's repairs and pay back the people who trusted this place." Claire's eyes filled, but she held them steady. "And Lucy?" she asked. My jaw tightened. My daughter is not part of a settlement. Lucy opened her blue case and looked up at Claire. "I just want people to stop acting like my dad is smaller because his hands are dirty." That did what my words could not. Claire knelt in her red blazer until she was below Lucy's eyes instead of above them. "You're right," she said, and I was one of those people. In the weeks that followed, Whitmore Performance Gallery posted the correction publicly, refunded the customers tied to Victor's inflated estimates, and turned the records over to investigators. Claire sent no blank check. She did not try to buy forgiveness. Instead, through her father's foundation, she funded an independent diagnostic program for families whose insurance fought hearing upgrades as non-essential. Lucy got her new processor 3 months later as one child among many, and the first thing she heard clearly outside my garage was rain tapping the roof. I kept the bad red fuse in a clear box above my workbench beside Lucy's old blue hearing aid case. Not because I had beaten a rich woman's bet, because I had almost let fear name my price. Claire still brings the Porsche to my shop. She sits in the old vinyl chair, drinks burnt coffee, and asks questions before she assumes answers. We are not a fairy tale. Not yet. Maybe not ever the way people mean it. But when she looks at me now, she sees the man before the oil. And some mornings when Lucy hears the bay door roll open and runs in smiling, that is enough proof for me that the smallest things held by honest hands can change the sound of an entire room.